What kind of car has Adrian Newey built that made him break his usual silence and confess that this has never been done before at Aston Martin? And why has his reaction to seeing Alonso on the track set off alarms in the paddock? The arrival of the AMR26 to tire testing at the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya was anything but ordinary. For more than 3 days, the entire paddock wondered where Aston Martin was. In a context where every minute on the track is valuable, every lap represents crucial information, and where teams seek to validate months or even years of simulations with real data, the absence of the British team was beginning to raise increasingly serious suspicions. Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren had already completed hundreds of laps, testing not only performance but reliability and adaptation to the new Pirelli compounds. But Aston Martin had not traveled even a meter. On Wednesday night, with the atmosphere full of rumors, it emerged that the team led by Adrian Newey was still assembling the car in its garage. The speculation skyrocketed. Some media suggested that there was a structural failure in the chassis. Others that the Honda engine had not passed the integration tests. There was even talk that they would not reach Bahrain. However, the truth was even more disconcerting. Adrian Newey had made an unusual decision in the modern era of Formula One, to voluntarily delay the track entry to protect the purity of the concept. Newey, new to the team in March 2025, immediately identified a critical dissonance between the simulation and wind tunnel data. This lack of correlation, a kind of disconnect between what the car said to be in the computers and what it was in the actual flow of air, represented a mortal risk for any ambitious design. For someone with his background, this was not acceptable. So not only did he order a restructuring of the technical approach, but he also halted active development of the car until the root problem was corrected. The AMR26 project, therefore, started 4 months behind its rivals. In Formula One, that's an eternity. And yet, the team did not panic. There were no rushed decisions or intermediate versions of the car to get by in testing. Newey was blunt. The AMR26 had to hit the track only when it fulfilled its complete vision, without shortcuts, without compromises. By the time the car first appeared with Lance Stroll behind the wheel on Thursday afternoon, the attention of the entire paddock was focused on one thing. Was it worth the delay? The AMR26 wasn't just another car with a new aero package. From the first glance, experts noticed details that were impossible to ignore. The front wing featured a geometry that defied the patterns established in 2025. The rear part was so compact that many wondered how they had managed to fit the power unit, radiators, batteries, and gearbox there. The air intake seemed almost non-existent, revealing a level of packaging that had only been seen in the most extreme cars designed by Newey at Red Bull, but even riskier. Sensors strategically placed in key areas indicated that this was no simple shakedown. Aston Martin was collecting data to validate a philosophy that could change the hierarchy of the grid. The context of the moment was key to understanding the radical nature of this bet. 2026 represented an important technical rule change. And although the other teams began their projects from January 2025, Aston Martin chose to wait. Newey's priority was not to meet deadlines, but to present a car whose concept was deeply aligned with the new regulatory requirements. This right first, fast second philosophy stands in stark contrast to the prevailing mentality of many teams that release half-finished cars to meet testing dates and improve as they go. When Stroll started riding, he didn't do it with the goal of setting fast times. The car ran in conservative settings with limited engine maps and high downforce, typical of a car in its first test. But even so, Aston Martin's internal data showed something unusual. The correlation between simulator, wind tunnel and track was above 95%. In technical terms, this is an anomaly. And for Adrian Newey, who has been building world champions since the 90s, this was a sure sign that they were onto something very special. The other teams, realizing this, began to change their approach. The Ferrari and Mercedes engineers approached the Aston Martin pit more times than usual. The rivals' cameras recorded every centimeter of the car, trying to decipher details of the diffuser, the side pods, the suspensions. But the AMR26 seemed like a closed book, with many of its solutions hidden under fairings and compact structures designed precisely to make technical espionage difficult. And then, right at the end of the day, something happened that would go almost unnoticed by the general public, but that would change the tone of the conversation within the paddock. It was confirmed that Fernando Alonso would get into the car at the last hour of the next day. And everyone knew that, with Alonso at the wheel and a Newey car under his arm, the real answers would begin to arrive. Was it a late debut? Yes. Was it worrying for the rivals? Absolutely. Because beyond the stopwatch, what terrified the rest was not the present of the AMR26, but its potential. The paddock was expectant. Following the quiet appearance of the AMR26 in the hands of Lance Stroll, engineers and technical analysts began taking notes, recording, photographing, and speculating. But the real moment that changed the narrative didn't come until Friday at noon, when Fernando Alonso left the box and headed toward the track. It was then that the technical became emotional, the logical became symbolic, and the experimental became a real threat. Because in that moment it was clear that something different was happening. From the pit lane, engineers from several teams stopped looking at their monitors and turned their heads toward the track. Alonso's onboard cameras began to transmit, and in the Aston Martin box, Adrian Newey, usually reserved, methodical, and clinical in his body language, leaned forward, staring at the screens as if he were seeing the future. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. I was just observing. What was happening before him was a real-time validation of years of experience and months of working against the grain. From the first lap launched, Fernando Alonso did not take long to understand the car. And that verb, understand, has enormous weight when talking about a car designed by Newey. Because it's not just about pushing the car to the limit, it's about feeling the design intent, reading the invisible airflow, knowing how the chassis behaves before it even does. The sensors showed something almost impossible for a newborn car. Alonso was taking the AMR26 to the edge of the mechanical limit without exceeding it, without sudden corrections, without hesitation. The transitions between braking, turning, and acceleration were clean, the minimum speed in the curve was higher than expected, and the use of the precise, surgical piano made it evident that the Spaniard had already deciphered the internal logic of the car. This sparked an immediate reaction from Newey. Witnesses in the box claimed that at one point the British engineer smiled. But it was not a smile of satisfaction or celebration. It was a smile that revealed disbelief. A mixture of absolute respect for what he was seeing and an internal revelation. His most recent design, the one he had bet everything on, was working just as it had been conceived, perhaps even better. And that was the most unexpected thing. Because the AMR26 was not complete. That version that Alonso drove was only the base chassis, without the key parts of the final aerodynamic package. It did not yet have the new flat bottom developed specifically for high-load tracks. It did not have the active deflectors that were being validated at Silverstone or the final geometry of the engine cover. But even without all that, the car already offered astonishing lateral stability, extremely precise front axle behavior, and corner exit traction comparable to the previous year's world champion McLaren. Aston Martin's internal records showed a correlation of more than 95% between simulation and real track data. But beyond the numbers, what was most surprising was Alonso's pace of adaptation. In just 6 laps he had changed his braking style twice, adjusted his line in the long corners, and varied his entry angle in 3 sectors of the circuit. And he did it without errors, without blockages, without going over the limit. It was as if he had already lived with that car for months. That ability to adapt was what really shook Newey. Because for a car designed under a logic of holistic flow, extreme compaction, and specific mass distribution to function at that level from its first outing, it needs someone behind the wheel who understands it beyond the superficial. And Alonso was doing it. In fact, I wasn't piloting it, I was figuring it out. On the outside, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But inside, in the private communication channels between engineers, messages loaded with contained emotion were exchanged. The most repeated comment among the technical team was, "We don't need to accelerate anything, the car will come on its own." Because if this was just the starting point, the basic version, what came in the following weeks could alter the hierarchical order of the entire grid. Some rumors maintained that Newey, at the end of Alonso's session, requested an immediate meeting with the simulation and aerodynamics department. The reason was simple. I wanted to validate a series of changes that I had saved, waiting precisely for a signal. And that sign had arrived. Not from a wind tunnel, nor from a CFD simulation. It had come from Fernando Alonso's steering wheel. That moment, that stare of Newey in front of the monitor, that first sequence of curves on the AMR26, marked a silent turning point. It was not a viral moment. There were no grandiose statements or explosive headlines. But everyone who was in Barcelona that day remembers it with the same feeling. Something important had just happened. And those who paid attention knew it well. The genius had created something special, and the right pilot had just shown it to the world without the need for words. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.